This is democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. After months of campaigning, advertising, and election spending, candidates across the country made a last-minute push Monday night as millions of voters head to the polls today. Polls suggest Republicans could win enough seats to retake control of the House, while Democrats are expected to narrowly hold on to the Senate, but this will all depend on you today going out to the polls. Meanwhile, the 2010 election is on track to be the most expensive non-presidential contest in U.S. history. Total campaign spending is projected to hit $4 billion. For analysis of the 2010 midterms, we go to Washington, D.C. We're joined by former presidential candidate, longtime consumer advocate, and corporate critic, Ralph Nader. Ralph Nader, welcome to Democracy Now! Let's start on the issue of money. $4 billion. Your response?
Well, after the Supreme Court decision in Citizens United in January of this year, Amy, which opened the floodgates to unlimited independent corporate money against or for candidates, the Republicans have set up, like the Democrats, these 501c4s to receive the money in secrecy. And the Republicans have now outspent the Democrats 7-1. In other words, they've moved very quickly when the floodgates opened after the Supreme Court decision 5-4 to overwhelm the Democrats with hundreds of millions of dollars of ads all over the country. I think about 60,000 additional ads. So this once again raises the whole issue of campaign finance reform, and both parties are dialing ferociously, often for the same dollars, and they're complicit, and they cannot make that an issue in the campaign. So that leaves nobody but third parties and independent candidates to make that an issue, which is why I think people should pay more attention to seasoned candidates like Howie Hawkins of the Green Party running for governor of New York, a citizen leader, an author, a working Teamster, a former Marine, who now gives people in New York the right to vote their conscience for these kinds of reforms, since it's a shoo-in for Cuomo for governor.
This issue of money, the $4 billion, the vast majority of at least $3 billion is going to campaign ads on television, which I dare say is why, I mean, you have the politicians not talking about it, and the media generally covers the debate between Democrats and Republicans, and since both are spending the money, they're not raising it. But then you have the media that could raise it, of course, independently, but they're raising the money. They're getting the vast majority of this money. We're seeing happening on a national scale what happens in Iowa every 4 years when they can upgrade their TV stations because of the ads there. What about the issue of free campaign ads? What would that single act alone mean?
Well, the public airways, as we know, belong to the people, and they're the landlords, and the radio and TV stations are the licensees. They're the tenants, so to speak. They pay no money to the FCC for their annual license, and therefore it's really quite persuasive were we to have a public policy to condition modestly the license to this enormously lucrative control of the public airways 24 hours a day by these TV and radio stations, and say, as part of the reciprocity for controlling this commons, so to speak, you have to allow a certain amount of time, free time on radio and TV for ballot qualified candidates. I supported this and talked about this in my presidential campaigns over the years, and third-party candidates are doing that. But today, as you say, the money coming into the radio and TV stations, Amy, are so massive, they completely overwhelm the profits from soap and toothpaste and hot dogs and cars. And the elections have become a commodity, a profit center for these radio and TV stations. Now, who's going to put this policy into effect? It's going to have to be the Congress. Well, good luck. The Congress is going to be completely deadlocked. If we thought it was deadlocked this year, wait until next year. If the Republicans control the House, headed by John Boehner, who is a fact-starved ideologue working on slogans, and all he knows how to say is no. And in the Senate, even in the Republican part, the libertarians who are going to bolster Senator DeMint from South Carolina will be a Trojan horse inside the Republican Party. So there's not going to anything's going to happen in the next 2 years. So we ought to use that time to build a civic movement, to build a political movement that will give people more voices and choices.
You have written a piece about 10 things to know about the Tea Party movement. We have put out on Facebook that you're going to be here, and lots of people wrote in to ask about the Tea Party movement. You have long been an advocate of third parties. The Tea Party movement is rising up. Your thoughts, Ralph Nader?
Well, we shouldn't stereotype the Tea Partiers. First of all, they range from the libertarians who do not like undeclared wars of aggression, who do not like corporate subsidies and bailouts, who do not like the Patriot Act, who do not like lack of law and order on corporate crime, and who do want diverse candidates, easier ballot access, initiative referendum recall. It ranges from the libertarian all the way to the vigorous advocates of plutocratic corporate control of our political economy. That's why I wrote this article, which is on nader.org, called 10 Questions to the Tea Partiers, and basically it splits those who are real libertarian, genuine paleo-conservatives from the corporatists who masquerade as conservatives. And it was a big mistake for the Democrats not to try to reach out to some of those libertarians and genuine conservatives who actually agree on some of the seminal, not all, obviously, some of the seminal issues of distribution of power and constitutionalism. What
about, you know, the people who go out, when you talk about your questions for the Tea Party, who carry signs like we have just been showing, and people go to our website at democracynow.org, that say things like impeach the Muslim Marxist, the white supremacist strains. What about that, Ralph Nader?
Well, obviously, that's part of what's called the Tea Party movement, because some people who are not accepted by some of the more reasonable Tea Party, genuine conservatives, libertarians, are riding with the wave. So you see genuine racists, you see anti-Semites against Arabs and Arab Americans, against Muslims, you see people who are prejudiced against Latinos, but we should not fall prey to stereotyping the whole Tea Party effort. The big mistake Progressive made last year was when they saw the Tea Partiers emerge, they didn't create a countervailing grassroots effort, which would have gotten them quite a bit of press. But if there's just one pulse called the Tea Party among the citizenry, they're going to get enormous press. And that's why,
well, let me ask
half tongue-in-cheek, I thought that the Progressives should have started a coffee party.
Well, let me ask you. I remember last anniversary of the invasion of Iraq, March 19th, 20th, that weekend in Washington. The Tea Party movement gathered in Washington. There were a couple of hundred Tea Party activists there. The media covered it extensively, perhaps as many journalists there as members of the Tea Party movement. But then there was also people who had come out to protest the war, and there were thousands of them. They didn't get half of the coverage of a much smaller group. So what about the issue of media coverage of the right and the far right?
Yeah, you're very accurate. There were 3,000 people in Lafayette Square right opposite the White House one weekend, 3 blocks from the Washington Post, protesting the Israeli invasion of Gaza, and it didn't get a paragraph. And that's true for other peace marches as well. I think the answer to your question is twofold. One is, when the mainstream media knows that one of their networks is pushing a movement, they tend to cover it more. And of course, Fox News is like the voice of the Tea Partiers, and Karl Rove and others, Dick Armey and others, who are trying to manipulate and channel Tea Partiers into the corporatist arena. The second reason, I think, is that the Tea Partiers filled a vacuum. Members of Congress go back in August 2009 for the so-called town meetings. The seats routinely are empty in these meetings. Suddenly, they came in and they started stomping and shouting at the members, and that stunned the members, and they overreacted, and then some of them didn't have any more town meetings. So I think that helped the effort as well. And I think it's quite clear that when the media knows there's big money behind any kind of grassroots movement, and there is big money, the Koch brothers, for example, and others are pouring money into what's called the Tea Party movement, they tend to cover it even more. It's just that it's like Ross Perot. When they knew he was a multi-billionaire, they covered him. I'm not a multi-billionaire, so they didn't cover me, even though my polls were pretty high to get on the presidential debates.
What about David and Charles Koch? Can you explain
Well,
who
they've
they are
been
and their
properly
significance?
exposed in the New Yorker by Jane Mayer. I think they represent something that is not paralleled on the progressive side. There are a lot of mega billionaires pouring money over the years. They helped create the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, a lot of these right-wing think tanks. They poured money into candidates and into the Republican Party. On the right-wing, corporate wing side, on the progressive side, the civic side, let's say, you don't have that kind of parallelism. George Soros, once in a while, puts some money in, but there are a lot of mega billionaires who are liberal, relatively, have some enlightened background, but they're not countervailing the weight of the power of the other side. And that's reflected in the 7-to-1 ratio in these new Citizen United 501c4 groups this year in favor of the Republicans.
Ralph Nader, you have a piece called Doomsday for Democrats. Will they be demolished by the most craven Republican Party in history? Will they be? And
yes,
what do you mean by
right
this?
now, I think if the trends bear out, Amy, well, once again, the Democrats will demonstrate to the American people they cannot defend the country against the most craven Republican Party in history. I mean, I've never seen worse Republicans. With every ounce of potential tolerance I have toward the Republicans, I can say that I have never seen crueler, more vicious, more unknowing Republicans in the Congress, with very few exceptions like Walter Jones from North Carolina. So what we see here is complicity. When people say, gee, why aren't the wars an issue? Well, because the Democrats are complicit in both the Iraq and Afghanistan war. Or why isn't corporate welfare and subsidies and bailouts of Wall Street crooks an issue? Well, because the Democrats have done the same thing as the Republicans. Just now, they're giving away the store to the taxpayer share in General Motors in the IPO that's about to be issued. And they say, well, why aren't the Democrats making a big deal of corporate crime against consumers and workers and issues like minimum wage and card check? Because the Democrats don't want to be involved in that. They're dialing for the same corporate dollars. They say, well, why aren't the Democrats raising these great civil liberty issues, like what's in the Patriot Act? Well, they just rubber-stamped another renewal over a year ago of the Patriot Act. So that's why they can't draw a bright line between the Democrats and Republicans, as Franklin Delano Roosevelt did in making the people think that the Republicans were the party of big business and the Democrats were the party of working people. And that worked a lot for both him and Harry Truman. Imagine what those two gentlemen would have done to today's Republican Party instead of the namby-pamby, wishy-washy, so-called phony bipartisanship of the Obama administration and his allies in Congress.